I guess I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Mark, and I was living what I thought was a pretty solid life with my wife, Jessica, and our 7-year-old son, Ethan. We had been married for nearly a decade, and while we had our ups and downs, life felt stable enough. Or at least that's what I thought. For context, Jessica and I met in college. She was the kind of girl who lit up a room with her energy. I fell hard for her. She was funny, bright, and ambitious. We got married right after graduation, built a nice life together, and welcomed our son a couple of years later. Everything seemed normal until recently, when the cracks began to show. It started small. Jessica had taken on tutoring as a side gig to help bring in extra cash. I thought it was great that she was doing something productive. She started spending a lot of time with our tutor, a guy named Ryan who was in his late 20s, fresh out of college. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd come home late some nights claiming she was helping him plan lessons or going over his materials. But I began to notice little changes in her behavior. She became more distant, her phone was always buzzing with messages, and she'd suddenly pull it away if I walked into the room. One evening I came home early from work. I thought I'd surprise her with dinner, maybe even rekindle some of that old spark. But when I walked into our living room, I saw her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, laughing at something on the screen. At that moment, I felt a twinge of something I couldn't quite place, discomfort, suspicion. I shrugged it off and made dinner anyway. Over the next few weeks, though, things escalated. I found myself seriously questioning the dynamic between Jessica and Ryan. There were whispers in the PTA meetings, comments from other parents about how close Jessica and Ryan seemed. I even overheard one of the other moms say something along the lines of, "I've never seen a tutor get so involved in a family's life before." My gut started clenching every time I saw Ryan at school functions, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The real kicker came when I accidentally stumbled across a series of text messages on Jessica's phone. She left it unlocked one day while she was in the shower, and my curiosity got the best of me. As I scanned through her conversations, my stomach dropped. There were flirty messages between her and Ryan, discussing personal matters, jokes that were far too intimate. One message in particular made my heart race. "Can't wait to see you tonight. The kids will be asleep and we can finally have some time together." That was the moment it all came crashing down. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I had to confront her, but I wanted to gather my thoughts first. I spent the entire night pacing around the house, replaying the messages in my head. I couldn't believe she'd be so reckless, so careless. How could she do this to me and to our son? When Jessica finally came out of the shower, I confronted her. I led with the text messages, holding my phone like it was a smoking gun. "What the hell is this, Jess?" I demanded. The look on her face was one of pure shock. Not the innocent kind, but the kind that showed she knew she was caught. She stammered, trying to deny everything at first. "Mark, you don't understand. Ryan's just a friend. We were discussing schoolwork." "Stop lying." I interrupted, my voice rising. "You think I'm stupid? I saw the messages. You've crossed a line, Jess." Her demeanor shifted as the panic set in. She scrambled for excuses, laughing nervously. "I swear it's not what you think. It was just a moment of weakness. I didn't mean to hurt you." But her words felt hollow, like they were crafted just to get her out of a tight spot. She didn't seem remorseful. She was desperate to save her skin. I felt a mix of anger and deep sadness washing over me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was stand there, watching the woman I thought I knew unravel before my eyes. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. "You've broken my trust, Jess. I don't think I can get past this." The weight of her betrayal settled heavily in my chest, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. I had to decide what to do next, but my mind was racing with thoughts of revenge, protection, and making things right for Ethan. I needed a plan. After that night, I was overwhelmed with emotions. I was furious, heartbroken, and confused. I couldn't wrap my head around how the woman I loved, the mother of my child, could betray me like this. Jessica's tears had done little to assuage the storm brewing inside me. I knew I had to think clearly, but my heart was pounding with a desperate need for action. I needed to regain control of my life, to protect Ethan, and to ensure that this betrayal didn't go unpunished. In the days that followed, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Ethan's sake. I took him to school each morning, sat through endless hours of work, and even made small talk with Jessica when she'd occasionally wander into the living room. But underneath the surface, I was boiling. I watched as she tried to play the role of a devoted wife, cooking dinner, helping with Ethan's homework, but all I could see was the woman who had shattered my trust. I began to formulate a plan. Part of me felt guilty about seeking revenge. After all, we had built a life together, but the other part of me was driven by a sense of justice. I couldn't let Ryan, the tutor, get away with what he'd done to my family. He had crossed a line that went beyond a casual affair. He had violated the sanctity of our home. I needed to expose him for what he was, a deceptive opportunist who took advantage of his position. I took a couple of days to gather evidence. I started by documenting everything. I saved texts, screenshots of messages, and even made note of times when Jessica was working late with Ryan. I knew I couldn't confront Ryan without solid proof, otherwise it would just be my word against his. The thought of exposing him felt exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. One evening, while Jessica was out running errands, I decided to pay Ryan a visit. I pulled up to his apartment complex, feeling the adrenaline rush through my veins. I practiced what I was going to say in my head. I wanted to be calm, collected, and absolutely sure he understood the gravity of what he'd done. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and made my way to his door. I knocked firmly, my heart racing. A moment later, he answered, looking surprised and disheveled. "Mark, what are you doing here?" he asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Can we talk?" I said, stepping inside before he could protest. I was ready to unleash everything I had on him. Ryan's apartment was what I expected, messy and cluttered, with textbooks strewn across the living room. But as I glanced around, I was more focused on the man standing before me. "You think it's okay to get involved with a married woman, to betray a family?" I spat, unable to contain my anger. He looked taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. "Look, man, it's not what you think, Jess," I cut him off. "Don't give me that crap. I have evidence. I have all your messages, all the times she told me she was working late. You think I'm going to let you ruin my family without a fight?" Ryan's face paled. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a fling." A fling." I laughed bitterly. "You're playing with fire, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." We exchanged heated words, and I could see that he was beginning to break under the pressure. I laid out my plan to him directly. I was going to expose him to the school, to the parents, and to anyone who would listen. I wasn't going to let him continue to tutor innocent children if he was willing to betray a family like this. The look of dread on his face was satisfying. It was the first time in days that I felt in control of something. I walked out of that apartment feeling a sense of vindication, but I knew that the fallout was just beginning. Jessica might have betrayed me, but I was determined to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, not just to me, but to our family. In my mind, I already envisioned how I would break the news to her, how I would confront her once again, armed with the truth about her beloved tutor. I felt like I was on the brink of something big, but I was also painfully aware that the real battle was just beginning. I had to think strategically, not just emotionally, because this was about more than revenge. It was about protecting Ethan and ensuring he wasn't caught in the crossfire of our failing marriage. The days that followed my confrontation with Ryan were a mix of tension and resolve. I had set my plan in motion, and now it was time to confront Jessica with the truth. I felt all consumed by a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sadness, and a desperate need for justice. I needed her to understand the full impact of her actions, and I wanted to make sure Ryan faced the consequences of his betrayal, too. I spent sleepless nights with my mind racing, thinking through every detail of how I would reveal everything to Jessica. I wanted to catch her off guard, to make sure she couldn't twist the narrative or manipulate the situation in her favor. I envisioned the look on her face when I told her what I had done, and it gave me a sense of satisfaction. Finally, the day came. I decided. confront her after dinner when we were both home and Ethan was tucked away in bed. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming to herself as she washed the dishes. It was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. "Jess, can we talk?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. She appeared in the doorway, a dish towel in her hand. "Sure, what's up?" Her casual demeanor made my blood boil. How could she act like nothing had happened? I motioned for her to sit at the dining table. "I need you to listen to me carefully. I know everything." Her expression shifted from confusion to a mix of anxiety and defiance. "What are you talking about, Mark?" "Don't play dumb with me," I shot back. "I know about you and Ryan. I saw the messages. I confronted him, and now I have a plan to expose the truth." Her face went pale as the reality hit her. "You confronted him? What do you mean? You can't do that. It's none of your business." "What?" "Oh, it's very much my business," I replied, my voice low and calm. "You've betrayed me, Jess. You've destroyed our family, and I won't let him get away with it." She sat back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. "You're overreacting. It was just a fling, a stupid mistake. You don't have to drag him into this." I leaned forward, fixing her with a hard stare. "A mistake? A fling? You call sneaking around and lying to your husband a mistake? You think you can just brush this off?" "I didn't mean for it to get out of hand," she pleaded, her voice rising. "I was lonely, Mark. You've been so wrapped up in work I felt like I was doing everything alone." The audacity of her excuses made my blood boil. "Lonely, so that justifies cheating. What about Ethan? What about our family? You think this is just about you?" Her expression shifted from defensive to angry. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is. I didn't want to hurt you, but you weren't there for me." I shook my head, struggling to contain my frustration. "You could have talked to me, Jess. Instead, you chose to betray me. You chose to betray our son. You've made your bed and now you're going to lie in it." I could see the realization dawning on her. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done," I stated firmly. "Ryan will lose his job, and maybe then you'll understand the consequences of your actions. You need to see how your choices impact everyone around you." For a moment, silence hung in the air as Jessica tried to process my words. "You wouldn't do that," she said, her voice wavering. "You don't know me very well, do you?" I replied coldly. "You should have thought about that before you started this affair." As I watched her face crumble, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I didn't want to hurt her, but the reality was that she had already hurt me deeply. The anguish of betrayal was still fresh, and I needed her to understand that actions have consequences. After our confrontation, I began to gather the evidence I had collected. I meticulously compiled everything: texts, screenshots, notes from other parents, and even my own observations of their interactions. I felt a sense of purpose as I prepared to take action against Ryan. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for our family's integrity and our son's well-being. I decided to approach the school administration first. I wanted to make sure they understood the gravity of the situation and why Ryan should no longer be allowed to tutor students. As I walked into the school office, I felt a surge of determination. I was going to protect my son and ensure that Ryan couldn't exploit any other families. When I finally met with the principal, I explained the situation, presenting my evidence in a clear and concise manner. The principal listened intently, her expression turning serious as I laid out the facts. "This isn't just a personal issue," I emphasized. "This is about safeguarding our children. Ryan has used his position to manipulate and emotionally betray a family. If he's allowed to continue tutoring, who knows what other damage he could do." The principal promised to look into it. Immediately, I left the office feeling a sense of relief, knowing I had taken the first step toward justice, but I also knew that this was only the beginning. I had to confront Jessica again, and this time I wanted her to grasp the full scope of what she had done, not just to me but to our family. As I drove home, I thought about Ethan and how I could protect him from the fallout of his mother's actions. I needed to stay strong for him, even as my world crumbled around me. I was determined to turn this painful chapter into something that could ultimately lead to healing and resolution, even if it meant facing the harshest of truths. The days following my confrontation with Jessica were emotionally taxing. I was walking on a tightrope, trying to maintain some normalcy for Ethan while simultaneously preparing for the fallout that was about to come crashing down on our family. I had taken the first step to expose Ryan, but I knew that confronting Jessica about the consequences of her actions would be the hardest part. After I returned home from the school meeting, I felt a knot in my stomach. Jessica was sitting in the living room, seemingly lost in thought as if she were trying to come to terms with everything. I could see her looking at the family photos we had framed on the wall, the smiles from happier days feeling like distant memories now. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Jess, we need to talk again," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked up, her face a mask of anxiety. "Mark, please, I know I messed up, but can't we just move past this? We can work on things together just like we always have." "Move past this," I replied, incredulity creeping into my tone. "You think this is something we can just sweep under the rug? You've betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now you want to pretend it didn't happen." "I'm trying to take responsibility," she insisted, her voice breaking. "I'm trying to apologize, but you won't let me." I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "You think an apology is enough? It's not just between you and me anymore. This affects Ethan. He deserves to have a stable home, and you've put that in jeopardy." "Ethan doesn't have to know," she exclaimed, desperation creeping into her voice. "I can fix this, we can fix this." I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and sorrow. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't just about fixing things between us. It's about what you've done to our family." I confronted Ryan and went to the school. "They're taking this seriously, Jess. He might lose his job because of what happened, and you need to understand the consequences of that." The color drained from her face. "You went to the school? Mark, how could you?" "Because I want our son to be safe," I shot back. "You've put him in a vulnerable position by having an affair with his tutor, and I won't let that slide. I loved you, but you've put yourself above our family, and I can't just sit back and let you pretend everything is okay." Her reaction was immediate, a mix of anger and fear. "You're ruining my life. You're overreacting, Mark. It was just a mistake." "Not to me, it wasn't," I said, my voice raising despite myself. "You think you can just label it a mistake and we can move on? This is a betrayal that cuts deep, Jess. You need to see the real impact of your actions." We went back and forth, emotions boiling over as I tried to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. I watched as she shifted from anger to sorrow, and it was clear that she was finally grasping the reality of the situation. "Do you even care about what this does to Ethan?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "You're so focused on yourself and your excuses that you're forgetting the most important thing in all of this. You've betrayed not just me, but our son's trust in you." A silence fell over the room as the weight of my words sank in. Jessica looked down, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you or him. I thought it was just a bit of fun. I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Fun?" I replied, my heart racing with disbelief. "You think this is some kind of game? You were playing with our lives, Jess. You're risking everything we've built for a thrill." What was left unsaid hung heavily in the air, and I could see her wrestle with her own guilt and shame. "I'm sorry, Mark, I really am. I didn't think it would hurt this much," she said, her voice trembling. "Sorry isn't going to cut it," I replied, my tone firm but softer than before. "You need to show me that you're willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, not just for us but for Ethan." There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, but I remained cautious. "You need to understand that trust is earned, and you've broken it in the worst way possible." As Jessica sat there, crying quietly, I realized that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. I wanted to protect Ethan and help Jessica realize the enormity of her actions, but I was also aware that forgiveness would take time. The bond we once had felt irreparably fractured, but perhaps there was still a way forward, if she could truly commit to understanding the depth of her betrayal. That night, we sat in silence, the weight of our conversation still hanging between us. I knew that while we were facing a storm, there might still be a chance for healing for both of us and for Ethan. But it would take more than words. It would take action, accountability, and a lot of hard work. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for us. The thought of rebuilding was daunting, but I was determined to fight for my family, no matter the cost. The following weeks were a blur. Jessica and I stumbled through the aftermath of our confrontation, wrestling with the new reality of our relationship. The tension in our house was palpable. It felt like we were both walking on eggshells, trying to navigate this uncharted territory. I wanted to be strong for Ethan, but every day felt like an uphill battle against the weight of betrayal that hung in the air. After I reported Ryan to the school, I braced myself for the fallout. I knew it would bring serious consequences for him, but I also worried about how it would affect Jessica. On one hand, I felt justified in my actions, but on the other, I knew that this entire situation was ripping our family apart. I couldn't shake the thought that exposing Ryan might also lead to greater repercussions for Jessica. One evening, as I was making dinner, Ethan came running into the kitchen, his face lighting up with joy. "Dad, guess what? We're having a field trip tomorrow," he exclaimed, oblivious to the tension that had been brewing in our house for weeks. "Really? That's great news, buddy," I replied, forcing a smile. Ethan's enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment I felt the weight on my shoulders lift. "Mom's coming too," he said, and my heart sank. I turned to Jessica, who was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, a slight frown on her face. "Yeah, I signed up to be a chaperone," she said, trying to sound upbeat. "I thought it would be nice for us to all do something together." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to encourage this temporary peace, but the other part knew that everything felt fragile. "Sounds like fun," I said, forcing the words out. "Just make sure to keep an eye on the other kids too." Jessica nodded, and I could see her trying to engage with Ethan, attempting to bridge the gap that had formed between us. But even as we sat down for dinner that night, I could sense that the laughter didn't reach her eyes. The guilt and shame of her actions were evident, affecting not just her but all of us. The next day, the field trip turned out to be a welcome distraction. We piled into the bus with other parents and kids, and for a few hours I managed to push the thoughts of betrayal aside. Watching Jessica interact with Ethan and other parents, I could see her genuinely trying to reconnect. It made me realize that deep down, amidst all the chaos, she still loved our son. But the question remained, could I ever trust her again? When we returned home that evening, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could rebuild brick by brick if we approached this with honesty and vulnerability. But a few days later, I received an email from the school administration. They informed me that they had conducted their investigation and that Ryan was indeed terminated from his position. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at the news, but it was short-lived. Jessica was devastated. We came home from dinner that night and she broke down in tears. "You didn't have to go that far, Mark. You didn't have to ruin his life," she cried, her face buried in her hands. "Jessica, he ruined our family first," I shot back, my voice rising in frustration. "He took advantage of our trust. I did what I had to do to protect Ethan. But it didn't have to end like this," she insisted, her voice choked with emotion. "You could have just talked to me about it, but instead you went behind my back. Behind your back, you've been cheating on me. How could I have trusted you to handle that conversation?" I countered. The air was thick with tension, and I felt the walls closing in. I knew we were at a crucial point in our journey, and I needed to help her understand why her actions had consequences. "You need to see that this isn't just about you and Ryan. It's about our family, and you need to take responsibility for your choices." As the days passed, we continued to have tense conversations, and I made it clear that I wanted Jessica to seek counseling, not just for our marriage but for herself as well. I suggested couples therapy, wanting to create a safe space where we could both express our feelings and work through the damage that had been inflicted. At first, Jessica resisted, claiming that she didn't need help. But after a particularly difficult argument one night, where both of us said things we regretted, she finally agreed. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. The night before our first therapy session, I found myself lying in bed, running through the many emotions I was feeling: anger, sadness, and even a glimmer of hope. I wanted to believe that we could heal, but it was hard to shake the doubt that lingered in my mind. The next day, we both walked into the therapist's office, and I could feel the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. As we sat down, I knew this was our chance to lay everything out on the table, no holds barred. The therapist guided us through our feelings, and I allowed myself to be vulnerable for the first time in weeks. I shared my pain, how deeply Jessica's betrayal had cut me, and how the thought of losing my family had terrified me. Jessica, in turn, expressed her guilt and regret, trying to explain how she had fallen into a dark place. Session after session, we began to peel back the layers of our relationship, revealing the insecurities and fears we had both buried for too long. It was painful, but I started to feel the tiniest flickers of understanding and compassion between us. I began to realize that while Jessica had betrayed my trust, she was also a person who had been struggling in her own way. It didn't excuse her actions, but it allowed me to see her not just as the person who had hurt me, but also as someone grappling with her own demons. As we moved forward in therapy, I found myself reflecting on what I wanted for the future. I knew that we had a long way to go, but I was hopeful that we could emerge from this stronger than before. My top priority was still Ethan, and I wanted to ensure that he felt safe, loved, and protected throughout this journey. As we progressed through therapy, I began to see glimmers of the woman I had once fallen in love with, the woman who could make me laugh and fill our home with joy. It wasn't easy, and there were days when it felt like the shadows of betrayal loomed larger than the light of reconciliation. But slowly, we started to rebuild our fragile connection, brick by brick, as we learned to communicate openly and honestly. The therapy sessions became a safe haven where I could express my pain without fear of judgment, and Jessica could voice her regrets and fears. Each time we sat in that office, I felt the weight of our shared history lessen. We began to understand the underlying issues that had led her to seek affection outside our marriage. It was clear that this wasn't just about Ryan. It was about her own struggles with self-worth, loneliness, and feeling overwhelmed in our busy lives. One particularly powerful session stood out. Jessica broke down in tears as she shared how she had felt lost, overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood and work. I thought it was just a harmless distraction, she admitted through sobs. I thought I could handle it and get back to normal, but I was wrong. I didn't realize how deep I had fallen until it was too late. Hearing her vulnerability broke something open within me. I could see the pain etched on her face, and for a moment I felt a wave of empathy wash over me. I realized that while what she did was unforgivable, she was still the mother of my child, and deep down, we both wanted to heal. I responded with honesty, sharing my own insecurities, fears, and the crushing pain of betrayal. "Jessica, I want to understand," I said softly, "but it's going to take time. I need to trust you again, and that's not something that can be fixed overnight." "I know," she replied, her voice trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't change what I did, but I promise to work on being better for you and for Ethan." As our sessions continued, I noticed subtle changes in our interactions at home. Jessica began to help more with Ethan's homework, engaging with him in ways I hadn't seen in months. I could see her trying, really trying to be the mother and partner I knew she could be. It was a slow transformation, but it felt like we were beginning to find our way back to each other. One evening, after a particularly good therapy session, we sat together on the couch, the air around us lighter than it had been in a long time. "Mark, I want to thank you for being patient with me," she said, looking deep into my eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful you're willing to try." I nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation. "I'm trying too, Jess. I want our family to be whole again, but it's going to take time. I need you to understand that." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady, "and I'm willing to do the work." As time went on, we began to forge a new routine. We implemented family nights where we would spend time together, playing games, watching movies, or just talking about our days. It felt good to be engaged with each other again, even if it was in small ways. I still carried the scars of betrayal, but I was starting to believe that healing was possible. I made it a point to keep the lines of communication open, and I encouraged Jessica to do the same. There were still moments of tension and reminders of the past, but we were learning to navigate those waters together. It wasn't a straight path, and there were days when I felt frustrated and angry. But each time I would lean into those feelings, I realized how important it was to express them rather than bottle them up. As the weeks turned into months, I started to see a light at the end of this dark tunnel. I was learning to forgive, not just for Jessica, but for myself. I needed to let go of the suffocating anger that had clouded my judgment and allowed us to start fresh. Our therapy sessions became less about the past and more about the future. We set goals for our family, focusing on rebuilding trust and strengthening our bond. We even started to discuss future plans together, including family vacations and projects around the house that we could work on as a team. It was during one of these conversations that Jessica turned to me, her eyes shining with sincerity. "Mark, I know I've hurt you deeply and I can never take that back, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being a better partner and mother. I want to rebuild our family stronger than ever." Her words resonated with me, and in that moment I felt a flicker of hope ignite within. I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of our story, they didn't have to define us. We could create a new narrative, one based on understanding, growth, and resilience. As we moved forward, I found strength in knowing that we were weathering this storm together. I was determined to protect Ethan and ensure that he felt safe and loved. We still had a long road ahead, but I was ready to walk it with Jessica, step by step. In the end, I learned that love isn't just about the perfect moments. It's about how we navigate the imperfect ones. Through the pain and betrayal, we discovered a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. It was a hard lesson, but one that ultimately shaped our family into something stronger. And as I embraced the uncertainty of what lay ahead, I felt grateful for the chance to rebuild, not just my relationship with Jessica, but our entire family. It wouldn't be easy, but the journey toward healing had begun, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make it work.